Welcome to Fan Fave with Katrina.
Fan Fave with Katrina.
It's time to talk pop culture.
It's a great day because you're listening to Fan Fave. Welcome back. I'm your host, Katrina, and we have a lot to talk about. First off, the Writers Guild of America strike is finally over. So today we're going to be talking all about the strike, why it happened, what happened during it, and what the strike ending means for the future of the entertainment industry. But first, let's do a pop recap to talk about all the pop culture things that I have not been able to stop talking about since the last time I spoke to you all on this podcast. So first, let's talk theater. Spamalot finally announced its casting for Lancelot. Now, they had announced the cast a few weeks ago, but then they spent a long time teasing this big announcement that they were going to cast Lancelot, and they finally revealed who will be playing Lancelot in this revival of Spamalot, and it's going to be Taran Killam, previously from Saturday Night Live, and this is a very comedic show, so I think that he's an absolutely fantastic pick for it. This is not his first time on Broadway. He actually played King George III. He was a replacement in Hamilton on Broadway, so he'll be heading to Spamalot, and then after him, it'll be Alex Brightman, who's coming in January, and he actually played the role of Lancelot in the revival's original Kennedy Center run. I'm very excited to see Alex Brightman, especially because I loved Alex Brightman in Beetlejuice. He has very great comedic timing, and he's really great at improv, so I really want to see what he does in this role since I missed its Kennedy Center run. Both of them are great picks though, whether you're going to see Spamalot now when it opens later this month, or if you're going to wait to see Alex Brightman in January. I think both Alex and Taran will be incredible in this show. I also want to talk about Merrily We Roll Along because Merrily opened with previews just recently, and this is a call for help because I cannot find affordable tickets anywhere. I'm trying to see the show on my birthday, December 17th, and that's peak tourist season, so someone please tell me good ways to get cheaper tickets with promo codes or resellers so I don't have to pay $300 to sit in the balcony. Thank you. And they should totally do a rush for this because one thing about me, I don't care about having to sit and wait. Like I waited 5 hours for rush tickets to the Music Man. I also went out and camped out for a few hours to get rush tickets to see Parade. It's just me in my chair chilling. It's so fun to me, and I really love doing rush for Broadway shows because you can kind of be spontaneous with it and just wake up and decide to go see a Broadway show, and it's cheaper that way. So I definitely think that maybe after they open, Merrily should definitely add a rush because I don't trust my ability or luck to win the lottery. The last theater thing that I want to talk about is the Broadway flea market, and I love going to this every year, but this year I unfortunately did not make it. But if you did go and you bought a poster, fun fact, me and my friend were actually on all of the marketing and promotional material for this flea market from last year when we went. So I'm actually the girl wearing a Dear Evan Hansen hat and holding up a Moulin Rouge playbill, obviously. The posters were also hung as flags all down 44th Street where the flea market took place, so call that my Broadway debut. Now in music, so much to talk about. I mean, in general, there's just so much to talk about today, like pop culture overload in the last 2 weeks. First, I want to talk about Megan Thee Stallion. She joined Beyonce on her Renaissance tour as a special guest in Houston. And if you haven't seen the videos, definitely check it out because I just thought it was so funny how Megan was literally fangirling on stage after her performance. She could not believe that she had just performed with Beyonce. I mean, she's incredible and the video is just so funny, so you should definitely check it out. The 1975, also a band that I used to be a huge fan of when I was a teenager, that Tumblr 2013, 2014 era. If you know what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I mean. But the 1975, they announced they're going on a hiatus, and that word scared me when I heard about it because, I've never seen them live, but 13-year-old me, I need to hear those older songs live. Falling For You, I have to hear it live. So when I heard that, I was like, hiatus. Okay, a lot of my favorite older bands like One Direction, Fifth Harmony, when they say hiatus, that means they're done. They're broken up. But this came after Matty Healy made those comments at a concert, and he recently clarified that this is just a hiatus from live shows, and it's just a fair and normal break, and that they are not breaking up. So I'm going to trust those words for now and see if I ever get the chance to see the 1975 live. And I actually have seen Matty Healy live because back in December, Jack Antonoff, every year he does this talent show and he brings on like a bunch of his friends to do like this special concert for charity. And he brought out Maddie Healy for that show. So I saw him there, but Maddie is not the 1975. I had to see them all together. I have to hear them sing the 1975 songs. So hopefully hiatus is just a hiatus this time. And then guys, it's Jingle Ball season. It's one of my favorite times of the year. For those that don't know what Jingle Ball is, it's basically this tour across the US and it's hosted by iHeartRadio, which is one of the leading radio companies. They own like a lot of top 40 radio stations that play like typical pop music, and it's these top 40 radio stations that each host their own holiday concert in like a lot of different cities. So they have it in like Atlanta, Chicago, Tampa, Los Angeles, New York, and they finally just announced their lineups. And you guys, I have a lot of thoughts. I try to go every year to Jingle Ball because it's usually like days before my birthday. I've been going for many, many years. If you don't know already, I'm from Washington, D.C., and I've been to the D.C. Jingle Ball. I've been going since like 2015, and then I go every year. I really have like a really great time, and when I went up to NYU, I also did go to like the Z100 New York Jingle Ball. But my thing is, I just did not like the lineups that much this year. I mean, the DC lineup is like fine, not fine for me. I mean, the headliners are One Republic, and then we also have Jelly Roll, which I'm not familiar with, and then Big Time Rush, which I am familiar with and would love to see. Doechii, Flo Rida, David Kushner, Melanie Martinez, NCT Dream, and another K-pop group, G-Idol. And usually I'm like, okay, I'll just win tickets to this. But this one, I'm like, I don't even think I want to go to this one. But New York got Olivia Rodrigo and SZA. So I'm like, I have to be there. And so I didn't even get tickets to see Olivia and her tour for her Sour Tour. And so I'm like, this could be my chance to see Olivia live since that ticket on sale was such a mess. But I already know like this ticket on sale was such a mess too, because New York Jingle Ball is just like very hard to get tickets to. I remember back in 2019, that was the year that I went but didn't really go. I went to their pre-show, and that was the year that Taylor Swift performed at the real show. And the real show was so impossible to get tickets to. And this was before like I feel like this second craze of like Taylor Swift fans, because the ticket resale prices were just like $150. And I don't mean to say like just $150, but if Taylor Swift did Jingle Ball now, it would be like $1,000. So at this point it was like $150, but it was like $150 to be behind the stage. So there was just like no way that I was going to that Jingle Ball. But anyways, this Jingle Ball has Olivia Rodrigo, and I feel like Olivia has, in terms of like arenas, this like way of she's going to be able to sell it out like all by herself. So I'm just like really curious how hard it's going to be. I have the pre-sale access, so I'm going to see it. I'm going to try, but I really, really, really want to be there for my birthday at New York Jingle Ball. And I love Olivia Rodrigo and SZA, so I think that they will be amazing. Now, let's talk football. It's been a great 2 weeks for football fans. First off, I'm not really into indulging into celebrity gossip on this podcast, but I cannot stop following this story of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I guess it's funny to me because I have no reason to turn on a Chiefs game, but I absolutely do it for Taylor. Like, is it just me, or does it all seem like her 1989 squad era is back? Like the girls' night out, the VMAs, all that kind of stuff. And you know what? What I just realized is that 1989 Taylor's version is coming out. Like, what if we just got like a new Bad Blood music video with like her new squad? Maybe these public appearances are all intentional. I don't know, but I think it's insane the impact that Taylor going to Chiefs games have had. Like, Travis Kelce jersey sales have skyrocketed, and a lot of people are like, why? But I feel like it helps that the Chiefs are winning, to be honest. Like, if Travis played for a trash football team, people probably wouldn't run to support it as much, I don't think. But instead, it's like an introduction to football for a bunch of teenage girls and young women. So people are like, oh, well, this team is winning too. If I'm going to buy any football jersey, like Taylor Swift likes them, and they're like 2-time Super Bowl in the last 2 years, they've won Super Bowls. So it's like, if anyone else, like, I'm just going to pick the jersey of the team that's winning. But this is so funny. Travis and his brother, Jason Kelce, who plays for the Eagles. And side note, I know all this stuff about Travis, but it's not because of Taylor Swift. I've been following him since he's hosted SNL. But him and his brother have this podcast, and on it they had a question and answer session. And so many people that sent in questions had Taylor Swift related usernames on Twitter, and they were asking football related questions, general football questions, what is a down, for example. And it was so funny because Travis and Jason, they didn't make fun of the fans for asking these questions. They answered them in a genuine and educational way, and I thought that was pretty cool. Now, with all this excitement, I have to question the power of Taylor Swift in some ways. I just think sometimes things get a little bit too insane. I cannot believe that Heinz is releasing a limited bottle of ketchup and seemingly ranch just because a Taylor Swift update account tweet went viral saying Taylor was eating ketchup and seemingly ranch at the game. I mean, that's crazy. And slightly off topic, as a DMV girly, I also cannot believe McDonald's is releasing Mambo sauce, but that's a completely different conversation. Back to this sauce, I just think it's crazy how brands just move for Taylor and how it actually works. That's kind of scary that she could just do something or say something and it causes that much influence. If she wears something, people go and run and buy it. Or if she says this restaurant is good, if it's affordable, people are gonna go and eat there. And I mean, I feel like this level of fame for her just came on so fast after the pandemic. As someone that's been a fan of her for years and years and years, I feel like she has not been at this peak level of fame ever. And so it's just really, really insane to me. The other football thing I want to talk about is Usher at the Super Bowl. He was announced to be the Super Bowl headliner for the halftime, and at first I wasn't really excited about this, but then everyone kind of reminded me how many hits he actually has and how great of a performer he is. So I'm just really excited to see what he does. And one thing that's on my mind as well is what special guest may he bring out? I mean, I feel like that's one of the biggest things for me when it comes to a Super Bowl halftime is yeah, the headliner is cool, but sometimes the special guests make the whole show. I mean, my personal favorite Super Bowl halftime from the last decade, I want to say, is Coldplay, and it's primarily because they brought out Beyonce and Bruno Mars. That helped make their show. So I'm curious if he's going to have any special guests, because I remember that rumor about Destiny's Child and NSYNC headlining, and it's since been debunked that it was never even something being considered, but I'd still like to see it happen. So I'm curious if he'll bring out a group like that, or if he'll bring out Justin Bieber for the Somebody to Love remix. I mean, that's probably very zero chance happening, but I saw a lot of people talking about it and I was yes, I would love it if that happened. So we'll see how that goes. I'm really excited to see his performance. Recently, I also went to a really cool comedy show. It's called Ben Schwartz and Friends, and it was such a fun time. It was long-form improv, and if you don't know, Ben Schwartz is an actor from a variety of really, really great shows and movies, so he's really great, and the friends in attendance with him, they were Drew Tarver, Jess McKenna, and Colton Dunn, and basically how this works is it's a long-form improv show, and they go out and they talk to somebody in the audience, and they basically pose a random question of the night. So I think our question was something along the lines of what's something creepy that's happening to you lately? And he ended up talking to this student from Georgetown, and she talked about her experience going to parties, and they basically asked a bunch of follow-up questions to kind of get to know her, what she studied, or the things that she does at Georgetown, who throws these parties, what clubs she's in. And because the show was in DC, there were also other Georgetown students in the audience, and so it ended up being this full conversation with there was one girl who was yelling down from the balcony answering their questions, and they take all this information from the audience and they create this whole story on the spot in improv, and it was just so funny. It was so much fun. I really loved it. And if you ever get the chance, I would definitely recommend checking out Ben Schwartz and Friends. I know he hinted at coming back to DC, and so I'm if he comes back, I definitely want to go, because I had wanted to see the show for a long time, and I was so glad that I could actually make it. And television, I have started to watch more reality shows just because I like the idea of having weekly television content just to look forward to and tune into, and I want to try some new stuff. So lately I've been watching a ton of Game Show Network. I love Hey Yahoo. I'm convinced I could go on Hey Yahoo and win. I'm 100% sure. I'm always yelling the answers at the screen. I know everything. And then I also like Split Second, but that one is harder by far. So it's just entertaining to watch. But I also started watching Survivor, and it's interesting. Very interesting for sure. I think I'm watching it more for the drama between the people, like how they vote each other off each week. I cannot wait to start seeing that, like, really get juicy. And I don't really care about the challenges that much, to be honest. And that's how I was with Love Island, too. Like, I cared about all the behind the scenes stuff, but when they went off and played the games, I didn't care. Like, I just wanted to see more Casa Amor and all, like, the drama and stuff. That's most interesting part, is, like, less about the concept and more about, like, just people interacting in, like, a reality setting and, like, that crazy world of, like, being left out in the wilderness. So I really enjoy it. It's only one episode of this season out so far, and I think I'll like it as it goes along, but we'll see after a few weeks if I'm still into it or not. Also, late night is back. How? Because the writer's strike is over, but we're going to be talking about all of that in today's episode. But finally, I want to close out by saying happy fall officially. Lots of fun pop culture things happen in the fall. It's the season where you turn Red Taylor's version up while drinking pumpkin spice products at Starbucks and swiping through Caitlin Covington's annual Christian Girl Autumn Fall photos. But it's October, considerably the spooky month, and I don't even truly celebrate Halloween, but in each episode released this month, I'm talking about something spooky in the pop recap, and today I just have a question to pose. What is the lore behind Spirit Halloween? Because the way they just immediately spawn and recently closed down stores is just so funny to me. Like, the Bed Bath & Beyond's just closed, and here goes Spirit Halloween in the old Bed Bath & Beyond. And I'm just curious, has there ever been a permanent Spirit Halloween, or just the one that opened in a building made specifically to just be a Spirit Halloween? Like, I'm curious how it works. Is it a franchise? Can I go buy a vacant building and open my own for 4 months of the year? There's like a Spirit Halloween flagship store in New Jersey, I actually learned, which is also where their headquarters are. And the building used to be a Circuit City, remember those? But even that one, I don't think is open year round. So it's just really interesting to me, like maybe I could do like a deep dive into this later, but I'm just curious, like how do these work? But let's get into the topic of today. Last week, the Writers Guild of America spent the entire weekend negotiating with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. They finally reached a tentative deal on September 24th, and then the WGA's negotiating committee, board, and council voted unanimously to officially end their strike after 148 days. With this huge and exciting news for the entertainment world, I just wanted to spend this episode doing a deep dive into the resilient fight the writers pursued over the last 5 months to better this industry as a whole. So let's start by breaking down the two key players in this strike. We have the Writers Guild of America, aka the WGA, which is a labor union representing film, television, radio, and online media writers. So most shows and movies that you watch, they're pretty much all written by Writers Guild of America writers, almost certainly if it's a show or movie from one of the major studios. Which kind of brings us into our second key player, the trade association known as the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. They actually represent over 350 TV and film companies in the United States, and they're the ones that negotiate with all of the unions like SAG-AFTRA, who are also currently on strike, as well as the Directors Guild of America and the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. Now, this Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, they include the major motion picture studios like Paramount Pictures, Sony Pictures, Universal Pictures, Walt Disney Studios, as well as Warner Brothers. They also include broadcast networks like ABC, CBS, Fox, and also all the streaming services, which is where a big chunk of the problems leading up to this strike came from, those streamers like Netflix. Every 3 years, these two organizations negotiate a new minimum basic agreement contract. So back in February of this year is kind of where it all started. This year was always the new year for the renewal of their minimum basic agreement between the studios and writers. So there was already a lot of talk and just preparation for these negotiations. And in February, that's when the Writers Guild of America put out their pattern of demands. This was essentially them highlighting the priorities they plan to focus on with these negotiations. Some of the things they were focusing on were increasing writer minimums and staffing requirements, better residuals, and having standard compensation on films, regardless of if it was going to a streaming service or to the theaters. They also talked about AI, keeping writers' jobs safe from all of that, and increasing healthcare benefits. So, a lot of really important stuff that they had to negotiate with this year, and 98.4% of Guild members voted to approve these demands in March, which allowed for the negotiators to officially bring these concerns to the negotiations with those studios. Also in March, the Writers Guild of America put out this bulletin basically talking about how writers for streaming services especially are not receiving sufficient pay. In fact, they even show data that basically says that writer pay has even declined in some areas. For example, median weekly writer-producer pay in television declined by 4% over the last 10 years, and for screenwriters, median pay declined 14% in the last 5 years. I also think it's important to note that with the rise of streaming, writers are working for less time because on streaming services, seasons tend to be way shorter than they typically are on network television. I mean, so many shows on Netflix and HBO, they're only like 8 to 10 episodes a season, which means the writers are employed for a much shorter period of time. So, in this summary that the Writers Guild put out back in March, they closed it by saying their 2023 negotiations must significantly address writer compensation. That was always a huge part for them. Negotiations began on March 20th for this new minimum basic agreement, but after weeks of negotiations, there were a lot of talk going around that a strike might be coming. On April 17th, the Writers Guild of America announced that 97.85% of members voted to authorize a strike if a deal was not reached. Now, May 1st came along. That was the deadline for this deal to be made for a new contract, and negotiations had stalled. So on May 2nd, 11,500 screenwriters began their strike. That would be the longest interruption to the film and television industry since the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there have been other writers' strikes in the past. There was the 2007 strike 15 years ago that was also heavily focused on residuals, but these Writers Guild of America strikes have also happened as early as 1960, which is when the very first one occurred, lasting 148 days. This 2023 writer's strike is the second longest writer's strike in history, second to the 1988 Writers Guild of America strike, which lasted 153 days. On May 2nd, when a strike was officially called, we saw many writers going out to these studios and beginning their picketing outside, but I also remember a lot of people saying that we wouldn't really see the impacts of the writer's strike right away because when you think about it, writers are the ones doing the early stages of work and development for the shows and movies that we love. So throughout the summer, a lot of shows and movies were still coming out because they were already done. The stuff that the writers were working on when they dropped their pencils, it was stuff for like next year. And so that stuff would end up getting pushed back. But in some ways, we did immediately see the effects of the strike because all of the late night shows immediately went dark. The Tonight Show, Late Night with Seth Meyers, Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel Live, they all have Writers Guild of America writers, and they had to stop production immediately. Saturday Night Live also only had 3 episodes left of their season 48 back in May, and this was shut down early as well. I actually remember because the strike started the week that Pete Davidson was supposed to host, and he was still doing promo for it, and I think even the cast and writers had gone in for that first day of the week to start production for the show, and all the talk online was like, is this even going to happen? And it ended up being canceled because then the strike started that Tuesday. And then we saw all the other shows having shifts early on, like award shows. Drew Barrymore stepped down from hosting the MTV Movie and Television Awards in solidarity. And then you had the Tony Awards, which had to go on without writers. And if you remember Ariana DeBose and her opening number of the Tonys, that was completely without any dialogue. And the whole show in general kind of moved very quickly along because they didn't have any writers to write the show. Now, unfortunately, some shows did try to go on despite the strike, and if you're wondering why that's a problem, essentially part of it is that typically writers will go on set to help tweak lines or scenes while a show is still being filmed. So for a scripted show to go on like that, they're either replacing the job of a WGA writer or eliminating it. So there were a lot of shows that were being shut down by picketing. I remember Daredevil being one, also Loot, and some other shows on like Netflix. But this was all before July 14th, when the actors joined the fight as SAG-AFTRA began their strike as well. And then everyone really stopped because the studios couldn't do anything without any actors. I think the fight for better pay for these careers really got even more powerful when the actors joined. I found this quote from Chris Keyser, who is the co-chair of the negotiating committee. He was speaking to The Hollywood Reporter, and he said, "With SAG by our side, we're more powerful than ever. There will be no path forward for our writers or for our actors who do not say enough. There is no mercy here. There is only a revolution that comes out of our power, and that's what we intend to achieve." And that's what they did. The writers did not give up. They stood together, pressed through, and advocated for themselves and what they needed to make writing in Hollywood livable and feasible as a career choice. After off and on negotiations, on September 24th, the Writers Guild of America announced their tentative agreement and picketing was suspended. Voting to ratify this contract is going on this week. So what's in the new contract? Lots of new increases for writers. It guarantees staff writers, editors, and executive story editors will see increases in their basic weekly wages over the next 3 years, starting with a 5% increase. There's also new minimums for writers being hired to a writer's room, depending on the length of the season. So, for example, if a show has less than 6 episodes, like limited series, at least 3 writers must be hired. And then between 7 to 12 episodes, if there's a show that long, 5 staff writers must be hired. There's also now a minimum duration for work, starting at 10 weeks for shows that have not been approved for production yet. One of the things that was also a big deal was residuals, especially in the streaming world. Now, writers get an extra bonus based on viewership, so if their show or movie is super successful, they can get more residuals. There's also new protections on artificial intelligence usage, which is not banned from being used, but there are new guidelines in place to keep AI from replacing the jobs of writers. And then they also added new provisions for healthcare. If you're curious about all of the aspects of the new Writers Guild of America Minimum Basic Agreement, you can check it out at WGAcontract2023.org. Honestly, I learned a lot from this strike. I knew working in entertainment as a writer or a production assistant or really anything, it's hard. The industry is almost all freelance, where everyone is working from show to show or from movie to movie, and the pay is not generally known for being that great. But I was just so shocked to hear how bad it truly was. I never would have thought that the writers weren't being paid fair amounts in residuals for streaming shows, for example. So it all really opened my eyes to a lot more of how this industry works. There were also many shows that I didn't even know were WGA covered until they tried to come back and were met with picketers and forced to shut down. Talk shows like The Drew Barrymore Show or even Dancing with the Stars, they have WGA writers included in their production. So, now that the Writers Guild of America strike is over, you may be wondering, what now? Many shows and movies had production or development paused, and their release dates were pushed back. SAG-AFTRA is still on strike and just began new negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. Until the SAG-AFTRA strike is over, most shows and movies will still not be in production. Obviously, stuff like the Emmy Awards, for example, also already have been pushed back. For now, the fight for the actors still stands. Some writer rooms are beginning to go back in preparation for the end of the actors' strike, and some shows are already coming back. The late night shows, which were the first things we saw go, have made their return this week. The Tonight Show, Late Night with Seth Meyers, Last Week Tonight, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and The Late Show with Stephen Colbert are all back. And yes, I already missed the Strike Force 5 podcast. Saturday Night Live is also expected to make a return this month. Several cast members have began posting that they're back in New York and ready to start back up with the show, so that's exciting. I'm really ready to see everyone be able to get back to work soon, though, so I hope that the talk SAG-AFTRA is having this week works out for them and that they're able to get the great deal they deserve, just like the Writers Guild of America did. That's all for today. As a reminder, this podcast is a hub for all things pop culture. Keep listening to Fan Fave for recaps and breakdowns of the latest in entertainment news, trending topics, and more. As Fan Fave is a bi-weekly podcast, you can expect new episodes every other Tuesday when I'll dive into a different aspect of pop culture. You can also stay in touch and join the Fan Fave community on social media, where I'll be posting additional video content and vlogs from my many adventures and events that I attend in the entertainment world. That's at Fan Fave Media everywhere. So connect with me because I want to interact and hear from all of you, my fellow fans of pop culture. Thanks for listening and see you soon.